Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. I am your host Geekman, and today we're going to learn how to create 3D shiny text effects in Photoshop using the Photoshop 3D tools. Now, a couple of assumptions I need to get out of the way right off the bat. Number one, I am using Photoshop CC 2018. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, some of the effects may not work as expected. Second, I am using Windows. So when I say hit the Control key on the keyboard, that's the Command key on a Mac. And if I say hit the Alt key on the keyboard, that's the Option key on a Mac. A third piece of information that is very important for this effect is you need to be using Photoshop CC or later. So CC 2016, 17, 18. If you're not using Photoshop CC or later, then you may not even have the 3D tools necessary to create this effect. That's it. Now we can get started by hitting Control N on the keyboard to bring up a new image dialog box. And let's rename this as 3D shiny text because that's what we're making. And we're going to make our width of 3,840 pixels, our height of 2,160 pixels, our resolution is 150 pixels per inch. Color mode is RGB, color 8-bit. Background contents, they're not going to matter because we're going to override that with an image. Our color space is going to be sRGB, and our pixel aspect ratio is square pixels. Hit create, and we're ready to begin. Now, like I said, the background here doesn't matter. I'm going to be using an image. You don't have to use a background image if you just want the text to be able to put it wherever you want, but I'll be using a background image. So let's bring that in by clicking and dragging from my other monitor. Now I'll resize it to fit my image, and that looks pretty good. I'll hit enter. Now I have a link in the description below where I have links to all of the images and fonts that I'll be using for this tutorial. Feel free to download those. They're all free, and follow along using that. Or you can use, as I said, any image that you want for the background or any font for this effect. Now that we've got our background in here, the important thing is not the background. The important thing is the image that you're going to be using for the reflection on your text. Okay, because for shiny text to have a good shine, it needs a reflected image within it. Okay, and that is where all the magic is going to happen. So I'm going to show you how to build this text from the bottom up. And one of the last things that I'm going to be doing is showing you how to put in the actual image that will reflect on the text to give it that actual shine. So here we go. We're going to go to our text tool by hitting T on the keyboard to bring up our text tool. And we're going to make sure by looking at our character palette that we're using No Continue or whatever font you choose. I'm using at 325 points. I've got the spacing in between my lines of text because I'm going to be doing this under two lines of pixel on top, magic on the bottom. I've got that spacing at 240 points, and I've got a kerning or spacing in between letters starting out at 25. The color I'm using is black, and I'm using all caps. Okay, so with that out of the way, we can now click here anywhere on our image and type in pixel, return, and then magic, like so. And the reason that I'm using two lines is so that it looks like it fits in this little hallway that is part of our background image. Now, one thing I do want to say is that the magic here is larger or longer or wider than the pixel on top of it, and I want to fix that. So I'm going to put my cursor in between some letters, and then by holding down Alt on the keyboard and using my left and right arrow keys, I can add spaces between the letters. Oh, kerning. So I'm going to hit twice there, twice there, twice there, and twice there. And now I'm pretty close. So I'm going to add one more between the X's and the E's. No, not the E, with the L and maybe the P here, and get rid of this guy. Yeah, that looks fine. So there we go. So now my P and the M and the L and the C line up pretty much, and now I can accept this by hitting the check mark, and our font is ready to go. Then I'm going to hit V on my keyboard to get to my move tool because I want to move this so that it looks more like it's in this hallway, and I can use the arrow keys also to nudge it slightly. So there you go. I now have my Pixel Magic text in my hallway, sitting, at least it looks like it's sitting on the floor of the hallway. Now we get into the 3D aspect of this, and this is I'm gonna run through this pretty quick because the objective here is not to give you a full rundown of the 3D tools in Photoshop. That is probably going to be another lesson much later on when we've worked up to that in these tutorials that I'm making. The important thing now is just to get this shiny text effect because you want that and you want to get in and out as quickly as possible so that you're not frightened by all the choices you're given in the 3D tools. Now, one thing I have to tell you before before we get to the 3D text tools is I have to tell you how to get back to the workspace that you're working in right now. Now, up here in the upper right-hand corner of Photoshop, you'll see the little search icon, and next to it will be this little box and a little arrow. Click on the little arrow and you'll see all the different workspaces. Most likely, if you haven't changed your default, you're still working under Essentials. Okay, so that will be the one that has a check mark next to it. Now, there are other ways to work with Photoshop where they have palettes laid out for you in the most easy way for you to do the work that you want to do, or that they assume you want to do for that particular image. For example, if you are painting and you click on the painting workspace, it will change to give you your swatches, your navigator, different brushes, layers, channels, paths, and it will give you all of these other options over here. And then let's say you want to do some photography work. You click on that and it's going to change also to histogram, navigator, channels, layers, paths, and all of these other options. And you can see that it just changes the palettes and the workspace that you're working with in order to give you access to the tools and information that you need most for the work that they assume you're trying to do. And you can create your own workspace by moving palettes around and then saving that layout as a new workspace, which is what I did for my tutorial space, which I click on and then I'm back to my tutorial space. So for now, that's the important thing to know, because if you need to get back to Essentials when we're done, you just want to click on Essentials when we're done. Okay, because when we get into the 3D tools, it's going to change the look of the workspace, and that might confuse you at first, but now you know how to get back to the workspace you're used to. All right, so the first thing that we need to do to make this into actual 3D text is right-click on our text layer and scroll all the way to the bottom where it says New 3D Extrusion from Selected Layer. Click on that, and it will ask you if you want to switch to the 3D workspace. Hit yes, and you can see we are now changed to a 3D workspace, and we now have 3D looking text. Okay, the first thing that we need to do once we have our 3D text is change the camera angle so that the text is more realistic in our scene. And the way that we do that is way down here on the bottom left, you'll see this little globe icon, and that is Orbit the 3D camera. And if you click on that and then move your mouse around, you'll see that the 3D object will move, or at least the camera around it will move. And what we want to do is, you see that blue line, you can see it peeking between the X and the E. We want that to be lined up with the back window there, or the door, or whatever you want to call it, so that it looks as if our Pixel Magic is sitting on the floor and the floor is receding into that big window or door. And you can see by doing it this way, I now have what looks like Pixel Magic in the hallway matching up with this line here. As we go backwards, see how the P looks like it's following these lines back here, and the L also looks like it's following this line here, right? That's what we've been looking for. So now we have our Pixel Magic. Now, if you already set your text where you want it to be and you're not using this particular background image, you can change this however you'd want. You can also use this right here to dolly the 3D camera, which will push and pull this in the scene so it gets bigger and smaller, like so. See? I can also hit Control-Z to move that back. And then this will pan the 3D camera so that the object will move around the scene like this. Okay, but we don't want to do that either, so I'm going to hit Control-Z, and now we are right back there. So this is what we're really looking for. So now that we have that, we're going to go over here and start working with our 3D layers. Okay, now the important thing here is to look at your 3D inflation models. And these are these guys right here, these first top 5. Okay, if you see here it says Pixel Magic, if you go back to your layer, that is the name of my text layer, is Pixel Magic. And that means that this Pixel Magic is our text layer. And what we want to do is check on this top one here, which is the front inflation material. And then you want to hold down Shift and click on the 5th one down, which is the Pixel Magic back inflation material. You click on that, you've selected all your materials. And once you have all of your materials, we're going to change some of the options up here. Now you can play around with this as much as you want. There are different surfaces that you can put in, but for this tutorial we're going to stick with just trying to make this look like a shiny text material. So the shine here that we want to make this into 60%, so we're going to make that 60. Our reflection here, we want that to be 100%. Our roughness, we're going to leave that at 0. Our bump here, we're going to make that 50. Okay, so that's now 50%. Opacity is going to stay at 100%, and refraction is going to be 1.000. Okay, and like I said, it doesn't look very good at the moment, but bear with me, it will get better. The next thing that we're going to do is click on the Pixel Magic layer itself, because that's going to give us our puffiness. Okay, and shape presets here, that's what we're looking for. We're going to click on this little arrow, and we're going to go down here to inflate. And you can play around with all of these, but we want this guy right here, which is called inflate. Click on that, and we've now got that little bubble look for our text. The next thing that we're going to do is our extrusion depth. That is how far back our text extrudes. And what we're looking for here is to be about half this width, maybe a little less. So we're going to make this 200 like so. And you can see that it's no longer as deep as it was. Okay, now we've got that and we're pretty happy. So we're going to go over here to infinite light. Okay, and the infinite light is the light source for the object. Okay, and right now it's coming in from up here and throwing a shadow. You can see the shadow right here, throwing our shadow slightly back and to the left. We want it to go down this hallway as if the light was in front. So we're going to move it like so. And you can see the shadows in the back there are moving. So we're going to make this right about here-ish. I think, well, no, right about there-ish. That looks pretty good to me. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to soften up our shadow slightly. Right now it's a very hard, thick shadow. We're going to change this to, let's say, 5% maybe. Okay, just to give it a little bit of softness. You can still make it out, but it's a little softer. The next thing that we're going to do, we're done with our infinite light. That was pretty easy. And we're going to go up here to the environment. That's the last thing that we're going to change, is up here, the environment. Now, the environment right now is this kind of gray nothingness. Okay, you can see the little picture here. It's a gray with a couple of lights, which is how you're getting some of this reflection here in our text. But that's not what we're looking for. What we're really looking for, and you can see that there's a circle here. That's what it wraps around to show you how this really works. And if you move this around, you can see everything is moving with it. So you can move this up and down, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but that's not really what we're looking for. What we want to do is we want to change this image. So you want to make sure IBL is checked. You want to click on this little icon here and then go to replace texture. And then you want to choose your texture, which is where I said it's very important to choose this texture beforehand. Now you can feel free to experiment with whatever textures you want. I'm going to be using these tech lights, but if you're using a background image that has a lot of colors and a lot of interesting pieces to it, then maybe you want to reuse that as the reflected part of your text. Okay, I'm going to use tech lights for this, so I'm just going to double click on that, and you'll see that everything goes crazy, which is great. Okay, because that's really what we're looking for shiny text. That's what gives it its shine. And you can then click here and you can move that around to get exactly the look that you want for your shiny text. Okay, now I happen to like it to look a little bit shiny and darkish, like so, especially in a hallway. Now, you'll see that this image is all over the place in the background. Ignore that. Only look at your actual text itself to get a feel for what it's going to look like, okay? So this is where we are with this. And now what we want to do is we want to change the shadow. No, not that. I'm sorry. What we want to do is change the shadow opacity here to make that, let's say, about 70%. And then our shadow softness, we want to make that, let's say, 2%. Okay? And that will soften the shadows in here and make things look a little bit better. All right, there we go. We now have this looking pretty good. And that's all that we have to do. Now, if you want to see what this looks like, there are two ways to do that before we render. And rendering is the last step. What you can do is you can click on any other tool on your tool palette like this, and you will then see your object in your scene. Or if you want to stay in your move tool, and move tool is where you can access all the 3D tools. If you want to stay in that, you can just go here to current view, click on that, and that will show you your current view. Okay, if you want to get rid of all the extra garbage down here, the lines and all that, you just click on your marquee, let's say, and that will give you an idea of what the finished product will look like. Now, this is not the finished product. It's not exactly what it's going to look like. This is just an approximation that Photoshop is showing you. In order to make this the actual final product, what you need to do is go over here on the bottom of the properties panel and click on render. Now, depending on your machine, this could take a short time all the way up to a very, very long time. I'm going to click on this and then I'm going to cut away and we'll be back before you know it. It should take me about 20 minutes or so to render this. For you, it may take longer or shorter, but I'll be back as soon as we're done. So let's get started. And we're back, and here you can see the final product. Now, if I zoom in nice and close, you can see that you've got this nice kind of shiny metal text effect for our image. Now, our palette layout is still in the 3D, so all we have to do is go up here, click on this, and go back to my tutorial, and you can see everything is looking the way that it should. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. I do new tutorials every Tuesday. And once again, this is Geekman signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.